Ever since September the 11th, we were told this day was inevitable.
Detonated 100 yards out of Liverpool Street Station at 8:51 this morning.
Today, all the alerts, the scares, the predictions became a quite appalling reality. Without warning, without provocation, 4 blasts ripped through London's transport system.
This is the day the if became the when.
Sort of first memory of that day was hearing the voice over the police radio, and very shaken male voice, and he literally said the words, "A bus has blown up in front of me."
The hardest thing was when we left the carriage for the last time and walked back not carrying anybody because there was no one else left to save.
I drove down here as fast as I could. I turned up to a whole load of satellite officers from all over the country who desperately just wanted to contribute in some way. So on the 7th of July 2005, 4 suicide bombers detonated devices on the public transport system here in London. So there were 3 underground stations that were bombed and a bus that was bombed. It happened on a busy commuting period on a weekday morning. 52 members of the public were killed and nearly 800 people were injured. These were the first suicide devices in the UK on this scale to kill and target members of the public.
It was the first attack that was inspired by Al-Qaeda on the UK mainland, and we were just not geared to respond to, you know, a mass casualty attack of that scale across multiple sites. That said, the investigative machine and response quickly adapted and evolved in order to do so.
I was working for Hertfordshire Constabulary, and I was a member of the special branch. I had been trained as a bomb scene examiner by SO13, that was the anti-terrorist branch here in London. And I was what they called a satellite officer, so trained by them to come and help manage bomb scenes and counter-terrorism searches and recover evidence. That morning I was sitting in my office watching this unfold on television. I made a number of phone calls down to London here to the forensic management team, and understood that this was a major deployment for them and that they were responding to what looked like a terrorist attack. I jumped straight in a car and I drove down here as fast as I could.
So I was a PC on response team at Camden Borough, and we'd just returned to the station for breakfast when our CAD controller put up that there was something going on at King's Cross station. They weren't sure what, they thought maybe it was a fire, and asked for units to respond. As we were en route to King's Cross, we were actually diverted to come here to Russell Square because there were reports of casualties fleeing the station. I think as soon as they mentioned that there was walking wounded and casualties, we realised that actually maybe it was something more sinister than a fire.
So I didn't join counter-terrorism until later that year. I was working, I was in a detective role, but I was working in our dedicated source unit. My sort of first memory of that day was hearing the voice over the police radio, and very shaken male voice, and he literally said the words, "A bus has blown up in front of me." We all jumped, you know, sort of grabbed kind of first aid kits and sort of descended on the police backyard, jumped into cars and started heading down. When we got there, I saw, people would have seen the images of the bus that was sort of, you know, almost looks like someone's taken a can opener to the top of the bus. It takes quite a while to sort of comprehend what's in front of you.
As soon as we walked into the station, we were asked to go meet the train driver who was down on the platform, who had walked the 1 mile from the train which had just left King's Cross, and he told us there'd been an explosion. And we did all go into the tunnel and make our way to the carriage to see who we could help.
Shortly after arriving, we became aware of the fact that there'd been another explosion at King's Cross. And so some of us were asked to make our way to King's Cross. There was a sort of moment of kind of waiting and being told that they needed people to go underground and help try and get people out that were trapped. And it's I have a really vivid kind of memory of being stood, waiting to go underground down to the tracks, and being scared of, you know, the sort of dangerousness of the situation, fearing what we were going to see, you know, and how horrific that was going to be, but this kind of sense of that we were just going to do it, you know, and that it was the right thing to do. And as it transpired, it became too dangerous for any other people to go down there, and I guess there was a sense of anybody that was alive had been evacuated, and so the sort of scene was kind of, you know, locked down.
We carried very significantly injured people out of the train that mile back to the station platform here with no stretchers, and physically that was demanding. But actually the hardest thing was when we left the carriage for the last time and walked back not carrying anybody because there was no one else left to save, and I think that was definitely the kind of heaviest journey that we made that day.
I turned up to a whole load of satellite officers from all over the country, all arriving in London, all at the same time, who desperately just wanted to contribute in some way to investigating what had happened and helping the victims. There was an overwhelming sense of professionalism. Everyone was busy, but I didn't see a single person panicking. There was a cool, determined professionalism about everybody that I came across. These experienced detectives and police staff working in this really pressured environment. The sense of compassion and commitment to victims was again astonishing to see. Seeing the commitment they had to the deceased and to recovering them with a tremendous sense of compassion and respect, and that commitment to discovering who was responsible so that the victims could see some form of closure. One of the toughest things was to see the impact it was having on some of those officers and staff. You know, some of these individuals were working in terrible conditions, particularly in the tunnels, and were involved in some of the most challenging work that we do here at Counter-Terrorism. And I was struck by all of that happening around me, and my role as a detective constable was simply to support those detectives investigate the scenes as best they could. I even spent 3-4 days, I don't remember the exact number of days, you know, I just spent that time photocopying, because we didn't have scanners. When the exhibits officers and the searchers and the detectives and the police staff and uniform officers all working in those scenes, searching in terrible conditions, find an ID document in one scene that's matched to a name in another scene. They come in as exhibits, they need photocopying, and then those photocopies need to get to everybody in the inquiry who then needs to do actions. Somebody needs to go and do the intelligence research. Somebody needs to work out the forensics attached to them. Even that, which is a relatively minor role, was something that everyone was queuing up to do. As I say, I was in the warehouse where the exhibits were, and there was just lots and lots of people doing that work.
That feeling of being in the team, but in its widest sense, I think of sort of blue light responders, knowing that they needed to head towards this in order to help.
What I saw at the time for 7/7 was a tremendous numbers of people coming together. So, you know, these SO13 officers were working alongside people from all sorts of organisations, both voluntary, but also, you know, particularly in the tunnels, BTP. The whole of the Met was leaning into this investigation. First responders did an astonishing job in very, very difficult circumstances.
The day before 7/7, I'd been interviewed for a new job to go and work at the anti-terrorist branch, and so I'd found out the day before that was going to be my next career move. I'd been successful. I took some comfort that I was going to have the opportunity to be involved in the investigation that would understand how this had happened and who was involved. I was very quickly involved in a whole range of different investigations and played a part in stopping you know, some potential other attacks and some late stage attack planning.
And I made the decision pretty much at the end of that first day that if I would do everything I could stay in London and stay working with SO13, and transferred straight into SO13 at the time. And I have been very fortunate throughout that time to be involved in, or in latter years respond in a leadership role to nearly every terrorist attack or major disruption that's happened in the United Kingdom. 7/7 probably led to the most significant change in both the structure, our partnerships, and our approach to keeping the public safe from terrorism. Probably more than any other investigation, but certainly 2017 was another year where we saw a seminal change. And we're now thinking again about, you know, how do we structure ourselves and best collaborate within our operations centre in London with our intelligence partners solely focused on keeping the public safe. Going right back to 9/11 and the Twin Towers, these are moments in history that have helped us to inform how we now keep the public safe.
There will be some people that were not born or were too young to really remember, but I think it's important to remember thousands of people that were affected, and there are many people still living with either the loss of a loved one or the sort of emotional kind of physical scars of that day.
I think it's important we remember them because they're part of London's DNA, they're part of our tapestry of events and history, and Londoners are still affected by what happened on 7/7, and therefore for us to really respond to our communities we need to understand our own history.
I got to see the best of policing, responding to victims, trying to keep people safe. And I take from 7/7 personally that sense of immense pride in watching how professional, compassionate and committed everybody I saw responding to that incident was. And I'm proud to say, now leading counter-terrorism in London, that I see that same sense of commitment and compassion in my own officers and staff and those within CTP around the whole country. I don't think I've ever seen such a mission-focused group of individuals than I see on a daily basis in counter-terrorism policing, and that mission is keeping the public safe.